All right, so shall we go ahead and get rolling? If we can take roll call.
Maria Ryan,
Here.
Stacy Gloss,
Here.
Morgan Johnston,
Here.
Elizabeth Mashesky,
Here.
Todd Russ, Andrew Stowe,
Here.
Stephen Wald, Scott Tess.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum, so let's get started, and I want to welcome our two newest members. I know some folks already know both of you, and maybe others don't, but Stacy Gloss is a research specialist with the Indoor Climate Research and Training Group located at the University of Illinois. With 6 years of experience in weatherization and energy efficiency in residential buildings, she's worked at ICRT since 2014, investigating combustion safety and the effects of weatherization on radon. Her background includes leading efforts in southeastern Kentucky on a community-based energy efficiency program, advocating in West Virginia for energy efficiency policies, and working with a local weatherization service provider in Knoxville, Tennessee. She studied sustainability at Appalachian State University, receiving her master's in Appalachian Studies and with a concentration in sustainable development. So welcome, and if you have any
Thank you.
other words you want to...
I feel like I should be getting up now to do about an hour-long presentation for this group on something. No, I'm kidding. No, I've been in Urbana for 2 years. Nice to see you all again. Nice to meet you for the first time. Just sort of excited to be on this committee and really look forward to working with it. So thank you.
Great. And Beth Mashesky is a research specialist at the Illinois Sustainable Technology Center, a part of the Prairie Research Institute at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. She earned her BS degree in geology and an MS degree in environmental engineering from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She works on a variety of projects at ISTC, including the Illinois Hazardous Waste Research Fund grant program. That was all one, sorry, I chopped that up. Sustainable seminar series, engagement via public events or online, and several laboratory research projects. She's interested in educating the public about sustainability measures that take a balanced approach to the three aspects of sustainability: environment, economic, and social. Welcome.
Thank you.
And anything if you have any
I was
other
just,
things
like
you want-
Stacey, I'm excited to be a part of the team, and good to see everyone.
All right, well, great having you both here. All right. Do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
Can I have a copy of the agenda?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Sounds like we're on track with that. So let's move to approval of the minutes from our previous meeting.
Can't take a paper copy of
I've got it.
Do we have any, well, let's go ahead and get a motion on the floor for the minutes, and then if we have any changes, we can treat them as amendments if that's,
I haven't had a chance to read them.
okay.
Review. Maybe can we postpone that to next meeting?
Well, if nobody objects, we could just do both sets of minutes next time. Okay, I think we'll do that. All right. Next, we have public input, but I do not see any members of the public who are here to address us, so we'll move into communications and the monthly staff report.
Good evening. First Climate Action Plan progress. The city, as I mentioned in previous meetings, has participated in a bid offering for solar installation at a city facility. Our first bid offering garnered one bid, but that bid didn't work out as the tariff, the rates structure at the city building was not going to result in any savings because of the strange rate structure. We've now rebid more or less the same type of project, but we're bidding at the Landscape Recycling Center's, actually, Scotch had the Arbor Division's shop, which is located at the closed landfill. So that bid closes this Friday, and we'll see if we are able to get any bids that are viable for what would be a ground-mounted solar installation at that facility. That facility may expand in the future, so it's probably best not to put the array on the roof, as the roof may change in the future. Perhaps our biggest piece of news on the next section is the Solar Urbana-Champaign program closed. In the staff report, it says it closed at 605 kilowatts. By the time our group's press release went out, it was 609 kilowatts of solar installed in 7 or 8 months, I guess from November. And that was on 82 homes, so 82 separate contracts. There were 150 homes that participated insofar as they got to the point of getting a site assessment and a proposal for solar at their home or business. So that's a lot of houses that are still very interested. Obviously, they went that far. For whatever reason, they weren't able to move forward with a contract, but maybe they will in the future. So that's really good. In total, the 82 participants, the folks that are going to get solar on their house or business by the end of the calendar year, are going to save $65,000 in energy costs over year one of their installation. So that's excellent. And then in addition to that, I don't think the number, there is in the press release, we had 430 attendants at all of our solar power hours. 24 of them across the entire county, so Urbana-Champaign, Savoy, and some of the other small towns. So a lot of people very interested in solar, learned a lot about solar, got proposals, and quite a few. I don't know, we don't have a way to track solar installations outside of a program that we're running, so we don't really know what the baseline is and the number of solar installations in a year. But presuming it's probably just a couple, and now we have 82 in 1 year. It's a pretty dramatic jump. Of course, we won't have 82 again next year, but one of the lasting effects that we did have from this program, and part of the purpose of DOE's Sunshot program, which we were the beneficiary of here, is to advance and develop the solar market. And the installer we chose actually not only hired extra staff, had extra staff hours in our market for this program, but has one permanent additional staff member staying in this market, continuing to develop and sell solar installations. So that's a lasting effect that we know is going to happen. So that's a really telling success of what we've done in terms of developing the solar market.
Yeah. I'm thinking too that, with their, because they had kind of partnered with Newberry, and, getting some of their crews, familiar with doing this work and getting a little bit more hands-on.
Yeah, that's another
with it as well,
another
so
great point. I
it's
mean, our vendor actually partnered with another company who developed their own skills and expertise a great deal further in solar. So they were already interested and had done a couple installations, but they just sort of fast forwarded their expertise, which is great. So we have a lot more activity in the community on that.
Did Bloomington's program kind of offshoot from our
Yes.
program?
In fact, it's all the same players except the city are basically taking the program, copy and paste over there.
And didn't we originally set a goal that was significantly lower
Yes.
than what we achieved?
It was like 100,
100?
Yeah.
and then like 150 is our stretch goal.
Yeah.
I got 609.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It is.
Is press release written that way?
I don't know if we mentioned that our original goals, but
I feel like also I don't remember whether it was Straight Up Solar or another partner, but they'd come here from immediately prior was Chicago area somewhere, and they had some number in Chicago. Did
Yes.
we exceed that?
Yeah, so there's two numbers in Chicago, and we think the numbers are, one is for City of Chicago only, and the other is for the Chicago program in total, which also had some of the suburbs. So the Chicago only number, I think, was 400 something, and the total Chicago solar program was 600. So yeah, per capita is quite good. And even in absolute terms, I guess we exceeded their program by 9 kilowatts. Now, we had a benefit they didn't, which was the state's SREC program, the subsidy. That's a substantial amount of money. It's hard to say how much more we got because of that, but yeah.
And Scott, do we have, or will you be getting the map of those locations? What's the data sharing from that, if any? Or even just how much was Urbana-Champaign or the county or?
We do have that split. I don't have it tonight, but and you know, behind the scenes, obviously the installer has all the addresses. I don't know if we want, you know, what the implications are of making, you know, such a map public. It would, unfortunately, because we, again, just in normal times, normal scenarios, we don't have the ability to track installations. When they come through the city permitting, it's just an electrical permit. So we would have to institute some new process if we wanted to track them. So even if we mapped the installations from this program, it would sort of stand still in time. Unless the building department is going to change something in the way they collect data. Any other questions on that?
I know there's a bunch of people in Platte County that would like to participate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good program. It, you know, dramatically lowers prices for a limited time. It's a good deal. Next, goal for action 3 was in our climate action plan, incorporate pollinator supported plant species in city landscapes. That's a adaptation strategy. The city, well, the mayor has signed the National Wildlife Federation's Mayors for Monarch Pledge. And we also have, that was recently, we've also had in our plan this goal to support pollinator supported plant species. And so these have come together. Arbor Division has added milkweed to a number of the landscapes they manage. They've also planned a new, well, actually they've adjusted plans for a future landscape on this property at the city building. Prior, they were planning for, let's say, traditional arbor values, you know, height, structure, color, that sort of thing, basically make an attractive landscape. Now they've redesigned that plan to incorporate pollinator supportive as well as monarch supportive plant species. So that's happening. We also supported several community gardens who were interested in installing pollinator and monarch supported plants. So that was Learman Gardens, the new garden operated by the Urbana Free Library, which is across the street from the library to the south, and the downtown garden behind Main Street. It's operated, it's on a city piece of property behind the public defender's office along the boneyard there. So there's already a vegetable garden there. So we enhanced a portion of that with some pollinator and monarch friendly species. On the Goal 5, Action 1, partner with existing energy efficiency programs and community groups. The Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge is working with SC&B Consulting, thanks to Todd Rusk, who's working with them. We're going to partner on a 3-event series of lunch and learns. It's going to talk about energy efficiency in commercial buildings and how to leverage that for buildings' participation in the Energy Star Challenge. We also partnered with Faith in Place to conduct an Energy IQ Hour. We're working on developing, kind of like the Solar Power Hour, a short, impactful, educational event that can be replicated over and over. That will, instead of driving people to a solar installation, will drive people to home energy efficiency, specifically into forming low carbon diet climate action teams, so 3, 4, 5 households. So we just conducted one of those with Faith in Place, and that has sprung a new climate action team is going to be meeting for the first time at First Presbyterian Church a couple of weeks from now. So we'll run those folks who participate through a 4-meeting series where they'll go through the guidebook and set goals and make changes in their lifestyle at home to be more energy efficient. So the idea here is to work on all levels. So top down is, government planning and programs, and like things like municipal electric aggregation. Bottom up is small community groups doing energy efficiency in their own homes. And so I work at all levels. Compact of Mayors is a nationwide and now a global partnership and goal setting and tracking program that the city, the mayor has pledged to support. They recently connected with a European group that had a different name but doing the same thing. So now those two are integrated. As far as I can tell, there's no implications for us, but it's good to be integrated. We are still working to resolve the data reporting and management issue. ClearPath now has a data connection to the Compact of Mayors reporting platform, but that platform is not updated, so I can't tell if our data has been successfully ported. So we'll continue to work on that. I'm not gonna, there's not anything for staff to do until it's fixed. So, Sustainable Water Management Plan, one of our goals was to retrofit water-saving toilets where appropriate in city facilities. So this is one of those items that we're planning to implement it at the end of budget years, insofar as there is money left in that facilities upgrade line item. And so we had just that much money left in a facilities line item this year. And we retrofitted one gallon per flush urinal at Public Works with a 1 pint per flush urinal at Public Works. That's about an 80%, 85% reduction in water use. So that seems to be going good, and we're going to work to continue that pattern. These are not retrofits that save a lot of money in terms of cost benefit. Water's cheap. Faucet aerators are a good deal because they only cost $2, but toilet retrofits don't save a lot of money. So we're doing it for the water savings, and we're doing it within those budget constraints. U-Cycle staff is working on a couple projects to ensure that we get good recycling participation from new multifamily buildings. One of the things we're doing is listed here. We're working specifically with Campus Circle Apartments, which is the new building on University Avenue. And so they've agreed to distribute U-Cycle brochures to all their first ever tenants. So we're really happy about that program. We're going to get that information in front of people as soon as they move in. We're also working on developing some simple and straightforward paper printed communication with new multifamily buildings before they even get constructed, so that recycling is taken into account in their design and planning and operations. We're also working to ensure that we get another electronics recycling event this year. We had one. It had overwhelming participation. The vendor that we used, the scenario was not working out for them. They're getting a lot of CRT TVs, which are expensive to handle and not a lot of value to recover. That vendor is not able to support our events anymore. U-Cycle staff, as well as staff from our partnering municipalities, are working on getting bids from other vendors. We have a bid that we think is workable, and so the different municipalities are considering that. And hopefully we'll have another electronics recycling event in October that will accept CRT TVs. These are the ones that are really hard to get rid of because there's really no one else that wants them. It's just a cost. Households are stuck because there's a landfill ban, and then there's no one who will take them. And state law was intended to provide a manufacturer's paid for collection, and part of that is you're not allowed to charge households because manufacturers are supposed to pay for it. That law is broken, so between you can't pay someone to take it, you can't put it in landfill, and we're having trouble finding a vendor who will recycle them for a reasonable amount of money, households are really stuck. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to negotiate some fees that are reasonable for all the municipalities to partner up. Hopefully in August we will have an announcement that will presumably say we have an event scheduled.
So is that in collaboration with the county and other places?
Correct. We do a cost sharing per capita.
I don't know if there's an answer to this question at present, but I would be curious to hear, maybe at next meeting, with Max having burned to the ground. And my understanding is that was like their whole operation is gone now. Is that? I mean, it said the automotive, but it said like all the other things as well. So I'm just curious about the impact on our community of not having that service available, and whether there's going to be alternatives for people who. I know I always had my
Is it
bucket of scrap
the
metal.
same company on North
Take
Lincoln
them,
as on Kerr Avenue or whatever the auto facility is, folks know?
They had fire in both locations.
I know, there was one, exactly. But it looked like they'd rebuilt or something was still going on at North Lincoln.
Yeah.
And that's
Where was
where
the fire at?
The most recent one was
Kerr.
in Kerr Avenue.
Okay, so the North Lincoln one is still operational.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Right.
what I thought. I thought they rebuilt
Okay.
and were open for business.
There's
Yeah,
one
they had a
on
fire
Kerr.
years ago.
Yeah, and
So
one
actually
on Kerr
earlier
was
this
just
year.
the automotive.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. That's what it looks like. They've got a really big lot with
Right.
cars of all kinds
And
of state.
there are other automotive recyclers around in the area, aren't
I
there?
think there are several scrap metal recyclers. I don't know if that means autos as well.
Right.
I think the Max location on North Lincoln takes an assortment of materials.
Right, yeah.
Electronics, generally speaking, there are places that you can get rid of it for no costs for the.
Because I think Next used to take computers. I don't know if they do
They still do.
anymore. Okay.
Yeah. So they and others will take that sort of electronics at no cost to the generator. But CRTs just don't have enough recoverable value for anybody to take them for nothing. So that's kind of the challenge. And that's a similar challenge with household hazardous waste. It's just the cost for the generator. No one can get enough value out of it to take it off your hands for nothing. My next regularly scheduled meeting would be August 2nd at 7 p.m. in council chambers.
It will be live on TV. All right.
August 2.
Yes.
And it looks like you also have some greenhouse gas inventory updates.
Yes. I put this document as a summary in your packet. But I also have just a couple slides to show you. Okay, so the Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Emissions, or Gas Emission Inventories, we're going to call that GPC. This is the guidance document that prescribes the way that communities, cities should account for their greenhouse gas emissions. It's a protocol that is meant to be comprehensive, and without being duplicative, without double counting anything, and also being a way that when cities compare and share data, that they're doing apples to apples. That protocol, a portion of that protocol, requires more asks because it's not a law. It's more of a recommendation for cities, but it asks or prescribes that potable water treatment facilities and wastewater treatment facilities be lumped together as a separate and distinct group, separate and distinct from commercial energy and residential energy. Heretofore, Urbana has rolled up water and wastewater facilities and their energy use, both their grid energy use and their process energy or process emissions, has rolled those up in, well, for the most part, actually, just their grid, their gas and electric has rolled those up in either commercial energy or residential energy, which is to say,
Industrial or residential?
or industrial.
Okay.
Yes, industrial or commercial. Which is to say, however Ameren reported those facilities' gas and electric use, that's how it got reported in our greenhouse gas inventory. We never pulled out those accounts out. We don't have that kind of access to Ameren's data. Doing that in the way we've been doing it doesn't change the total amount of emissions. It just changes what sector those emissions are accredited to. Todd Rusk was able to discuss getting specific data from Illinois American Water and Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District regarding their gas and electric consumption. These are both regional service providers, so they can't split their plant down the middle or down 1/3 and say this is how much of our gas and electric is attributable to Urbana. So what they did was give some data about what it costs them in energy to produce so much or handle so much volume, and then we multiplied that out to the volume that Urbana has in water consumption. And so that's how we came up with Urbana-specific gas and electric for potable water treatment and wastewater.
So, you mean that we looked at the energy per gallon?
Right.
And multiplied by the known gallon?
Correct.
It's not estimated water consumption, it's known water consumption.
The water consumption is metered, correct.
I'm curious for the sanitary district. I'm sorry, wait.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. Because they do some of their own energy generation on site. So is that accounted for?
Yeah, that's accounted for in what they say their energy demand is per.
Okay, so that's.
So those amounts have to be subtracted from the Ameren reported data because I still can't pull individual accounts out of Ameren. So I just take that amount and subtract it.
And with the assumption that it's all in industrial, even though some of it may have been in commercial.
Correct. These are big facilities, so the bulk of their gas and electric consumption is going to come from their plants, and a small amount is going to come from their business office that's at another location. So it's imprecise in the way that you described, but it's the best we can do. Right. So some of the implications of this. We have greater precision, particularly the proportion of water, wastewater to other sectors, and also the relative proportion of wastewater process emissions compared to wastewater, gas, and electric emissions. So wastewater alone, separate from potable water, wastewater has process emissions that we are supposed to collect and incorporate in our inventory.
So can I ask you to pause for a minute?
Sure.
It took me a while to understand process emissions.
Sure.
Are you going to go into that?
Sure.
Please do.
So-
I like the renewal, and I don't know if other people have had this conversation.
Sure. When the wastewater treatment plant powers a pump with electricity, that's grid supplied power. So that's not a process emission. That's accounted for in gas and electric billing. Process emissions is emissions that come from the chemical reactions in the wastewater facility. So if they emit methane from their treatment facilities, now they capture some of it, but if some of it gets out, it's a process emission. There is process emissions from nitrogen denitrification, and there's formulas built into the inventory tool to account for that. So those are process emissions. Before what we had was water, wastewater, gas and electric. It was in commercial industrial. Process emissions were the only thing accounted for in water, wastewater sector for our inventory. So you may recall that in our inventory, that sector was, tiny. It was nothing. So now we've brought that gas and electric back together with process emissions, so that sector is a little bit bigger. And this is what it looks like. So you can see that water, wastewater is closely proportional to the solid waste section. So again, the whole pie, exact same size, just changed how it was sliced up a little bit. And it's good to know, before we didn't really know whether that was a significant sector, separate from the rest of the industrial sector. For some, I can't tell you, I can't answer why the authors of the Global Protocol wanted water and wastewater to be separate from industrial. Maybe because in a lot of cities, states, countries, that sector is government owned. And so it's good to know, because the local governments would have direct control over it, different from other industries. That's speculation. I don't really know.
I suspect it also takes a lot more energy in places that don't have the same kind of aquifer as we do.
Could be.
Mm.
Could be.
Because I know there's some cities now that have integrated turbines in their water distribution system, and they're generating energy as the water flows down from wherever to their treatment plant.
So the lift station pump up, and then where the pipe is downhill.
Yes, I think the
Turbine.
examples are in California, where you actually have water coming down from the mountain. And
Sure.
they're just catching some of that energy.
Where the energy's free, where you're
That's
not
right.
pumping it, you can.
So they're turning that into energy, which then they offset from somewhere else.
I've heard that with stormwater.
Stormwater, yeah.
System.
So, the water, wastewater section and the solid waste section are very similar in size, but they're different in character. If we change the carbon intensity of the electric grid, the solid waste section doesn't change. It's essentially methane emissions from landfills. If we change the carbon intensity of the electric grid, the water, wastewater section does change dramatically. A lot of that is gas. I'd have to look again to see what the proportion of gas is to electric, but a portion of that is electric. And what's nice about that, of course, is if you change the carbon intensity of the grid, you change residential energy, water, wastewater, industrial energy, commercial energy. You change most of that pie chart. Transportation, if you change to the electric grid, you don't change transportation that much, because most of it is not electrified. But 3/4 of that grid is, gas and electric. Or three-quarters of that pie graph is gas and electric grid. So if you change that intensity, you get all those sectors at once. So that's important. Digging into, this is the particular sections of the water and wastewater module. So you have wastewater grid energy, gas and electric on top. Next is some process emissions. Actually, the next 1, 2, 3 are different types of process emissions. And then the fourth one is potable water energy. So this is actually the water and wastewater section. And then the next one is another process emissions. So what you see is that process emissions pale in comparison for the water treatment plants and the wastewater plants. Process emissions pale in comparison to the gas and electric consumption emissions. So this is instructive if we were talking to those facilities about what they might do. Before, we might have talked to them about process emissions. Now, I don't think we would talk about that too much.
Well,
That's
this already
things.
accounts for their methane capture.
Correct. It would their process emissions would be bigger if they didn't have methane capture at the wastewater treatment plant. But in terms of understanding where the big where the big bites are to take. This is instructive. Additional implications. It's one more calculation that we have to do outside of the ClearPath tool. So it's another opportunity for human error, math errors. And also, it's one more thing that has to be transferred from another staff person at some point.
No, you're not allowed to leave.
Yeah, yeah. And extending that, we're going to continue to provide this level of data, provided we get this level of analysis, provided we get this level of data. Also, because of the previous slide, at some point, staff needs to invest some time writing some SOPs on how our greenhouse gas inventory is done. Because while theoretically you just take the data from the utilities and you input it into the tool, it's not quite that simple.
So as the advisory committee, as a member, I would advise you to do that right now, not at some point, because all the stuff that you just did, if I had done it, I would not be able to write it down next week. Well, maybe, but it'd be hard, right? So we have a meeting next week. Is it just next week or 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. I think it would be reasonable to ask that you try to do it before then, because it's gonna take the shortest amount of time if you do it sooner. For you.
Based on memory and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. If this GPC is, I mean, looking at the logos at the bottom and everything, I don't know how standard it is or why, for example, you decided to adopt it and follow it, but the tool we're using, are they likely to incorporate it? I mean, is this the becoming standard or more baseline, and would we expect our tool to pick it up?
It is the most widely adopted standard or protocol, and our tool is built around the protocol. So our tool also is set up to capture water and wastewater separately.
Okay.
It's not, the issue isn't that we're having to tweak the tool. The issue is that we have to tweak how we get data outside the tool.
Okay.
So if we were a city where water and wastewater were public utilities, publicly owned utilities, this wouldn't be an issue, because at the point of data generation, those would all be separate already.
Okay.
Or if the utility was a public owned utility, again, data would be separate.
How does this change once Ameren brings smart meters in?
Smart meters won't change this, because that doesn't change the big picture collection and reporting of data.
Okay, I wasn't sure whether then you'd be able to track individual meters.
No, because the data is still proprietary in terms of the customer and the company. There's some general, I think there's a state statute that has some general language about sharing data. And there is certainly a statute that establishes privacy of data. It has to be aggregated in order to disclose, for the utility to be allowed to disclose. The smart grid is going to deliver better access and control of data to the individual customer, not to cities.
Are you?
Yeah, I think this is my last slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so not directly on topic, but related. Around the edges of this presentation, a fundamental insight is how much grid energy drives our overall performance. So you were saying 3/4 of the big pie is directly attributable to the carbon intensity of the grid. And my question to you is, I'm guessing, I haven't tracked this recently, that just over the last 3 years alone, the Midwest or Illinois grid has changed a fair amount. And with changes to nuclear energy in the state of Illinois, it may change substantially some more. Given that's such a big driver that's going to noise out a lot of the other adjustments we're making, what is the guidance for communities for, we're just riding along on the grid, we can't really control it as much, but that's going to swing our performance a lot. Flip side, maybe it matters enough to us that the city would want to take a position on nuclear energy or not, or maybe, you know, other things. I don't know what they might be, but I mean, I'd be curious what the gas revolution has meant, and the trends in the coal industry have meant over the life of this commission to our grid energy, and also what the implications of the policy around Illinois' nuclear plants mean
Sure.
for our grid energy.
I can speak in general terms on some of those and a little more specific terms on some of those questions. In terms of the impact of gas, in general, I think that's impacted the viability of coal plants, and so we've seen a lot of coal plant failures or retirements. In terms of the impact of the nuclear plant shutdowns, the question is, what is that electricity going to be replaced with? Illinois is already a net exporter of electricity, so it's, you know, I don't anticipate brownouts because a nuclear power plant would shut down. Also, we have a deregulated supply market, so you know, there's people with more expertise on grid energy than I, but my expectation is that electricity will be replaced by imports. Well, either we'll keep more of our electricity that we're already generating, which might change our grid intensity, or we will import electricity from other states, which could be a lot of wind. So it's hard to say what the impact will be. For Urbana, we buy, you know, in terms of the residential sector, we have renewable energy credits. So in that sense, nothing changes. We're still, you know, buying credits from wind facilities in Iowa. But while these plants, you know, may be facing retirement, there's also going to be new wind facilities that are installed here and in other states that are in our grid. So it's not entirely clear to me what the impact is. In terms of, you mentioned, you know, changes in our grid long term. So far, the slow uptick of renewables, based on the renewable portfolio standard, about matches the increase in emissions from population growth. So those are kind of zeroing each other out and keeping us on the level. I think it would be interesting to consider the impact of the potential passage of the Illinois Clean Jobs Program, as that would call for both expanded energy efficiency as well as a fix to the renewable portfolio standard and an extension of it. Actually, not an extension of an increase of its top level.
How often does our reporting protocol ask us to update grid energy? Does that happen every year when you run numbers, or?
The protocol, I don't know if it has guidance for how often you should conduct an emission. Is that what you're asking?
Just, yeah, when you're plugging in the carbon intensity of grid energy. Are you always pulling a fresh number?
Gotcha. So every single inventory you do, you have to tie to a background data set of carbon intensity for electricity, gas, gasoline, whatever it is. That, in terms of the grid, gas and electric, US EPA publishes a document called eGrid every 3 or 4 years. And so we basically tie each emission to the most recent eGrid, backward looking. So if the most recent eGrid is 2013 and we're doing a 2015 emissions inventory, it's tied to those 2013 data numbers with some adjustment for the renewable portfolio standard.
Oh, interesting. So there's not something you get from, someone remind me, what is our part of the grid called?
NYSEG.
Yeah, you don't get something from them about what's been bought, what the market is?
I don't know if
what
such a
the
document
intensity
exists.
is? Okay.
I know that the guidance we get from ClearPath is to reference the eGrid publication.
Okay.
In terms of what eGrid provides, there's a particular numbered chart, and it matches with the data that the ClearPath tool asks for.
Mhm.
It's an interesting thought if maybe MISO has an every single year grid intensity. I don't know if they do or not. But
Yeah,
it's
I'll take a look.
yeah, it'd be good to know. Because right now it's another adjustment that we have to do, and it's another area of imprecision.
Mm.
Because eGrid is just every few years.
But eGrid, I haven't really looked into. Does it have, personally, I don't do that, but do they have, it's like their number for Illinois, or is it our part of Illinois?
It's actually by,
County or something?
The whole ISO
what's
region.
MISO called?
Yeah. I forget what those regions are called right
Yeah.
now, but that whole grid,
Yeah.
whole portion of the grid.
Yeah, a service, what do they call them? Grid
Independent-
service
independent-
organization.
Independent service.
Independent service
Yeah.
organization.
Operator, actually.
Operator.
I don't know why. But so it's the eGrid for MISO.
Correct.
Okay, so they're probably somewhere.
And I think actually it's a sub-region of the ISO.
Hmm.
So, the ISOs may be out of that game because, EPA is doing it for them in this eGrid report. I don't know. But it's worth looking into
It
if we
seems
get
like
better.
the market's moves more than every 3 or 4 years, and I don't know how important. Again, it's probably a little distracting, right? That's going to drive everybody's emission signal a lot.
Mhm.
They'll all swing, and in a way, it's just sort of like arguing about swells on the ocean. Like we're all just going up and down on that, kind of like weather.
Yeah.
Can drive emissions,
Yeah.
but.
But still, in terms of tracking it, you're going to want to know.
Yes, and sometimes, again, it's like you kind of have to choose what you're going to pay attention to. And we did that with the residential sector and saying we're going to choose to make available this kind of, again, all the words aren't coming to my head right now, but our program that we do with residential energy made this big difference. Aggregation. And I don't know to what extent, yes, getting the city or choosing to cooperate with lots of cities to try to drive policy on renewable portfolio standards or other sorts of things might be a smart
Because
investment.
that seems, especially with IPS.
Yeah,
It seems really.
if you think about the 3/4, that is essentially gas and electric. And let's imagine that it's half gas, half electric. It's rough. There's not a lot we can do to change the carbon intensity of gas. We can only do efficiency there. So that's one where building by building or groups of buildings by groups of buildings, we have to make improvements on gas consumption. On the other half of that 3/4 of the pie, that's where if we change the grid, you can either do efficiency or change the grid or both. There's only, can you say there's only one grid? It's a big grid. Maybe there's only one serving us versus trying to impact the efficiency of, 50,000 structures or something there might be in Urbana. I don't know which one would be easier, changing the grid or changing 50,000 structures.
Exactly. That's right.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't do everything, right? So if there's a pathway for us to impact the grid and make it more renewable, that automatically affects all those structures. So.
All right. Anything more on our greenhouse gas inventory? All right. We have no continuing business this evening, so let's turn to our new business, which is about the Sustainability Advisory Commission seats. And I'll just briefly read, as I promised Co Compton I would, the email that she sent that was included in your packet. She wrote a few weeks ago saying, "Hi Maria, I'm writing after some conversation between Danielle and Scott about open seats on the SAC. I had suggested that a student might be considered. When I was on the Human Relations Commission, we had a special designation for an ex officio seat for a high school student. I made it a point to recruit one each year. It was good for the student and good for the commission. It did take some effort to reach out. I generally went through a teacher at UHS and then personally contacted and encouraged students I heard were interested. City processes can be daunting, so that contact can make the difference. Particularly for issues of sustainability in Urbana, a youth perspective could be a critical addition since they'll be reaping the results of the efforts you're making and aware in different ways of the threats we're facing environmentally. I guess that would require a change in the bylaws through the City Council. It's probably a simple process. Scott told me your next commission meeting is July 19th. I'll be out of town then, so here's my communication for that meeting. I'll be glad to come in a later one if that would make a difference. I know that one student who's been active in the Pastor Power Project did apply for the commission but didn't hear anything from the city. It might be worth extending an invitation to him to attend meetings and get to know people. He's Sage. I don't have contact or last name for him. Danielle does, and it's probably in the city file of applications. Best wishes. I appreciate the work you're doing, Cope. So, I'll just open the floor for discussion of that. I believe this would take, that we would just need to, if we wanted to move in this direction, request that the City Council expand the number of seats.
I think it would take an ordinance.
To put a change to the current ordinance, or?
Yeah, so there's an ordinance that establishes the SAC, and
Right.
it does prescribe things like terms and that sort of, excuse me, that sort of thing. So it seems appropriate to change that ordinance. If it was silent and it just said there's a commission and then the bylaws decided terms, then we just change the bylaws. But I think probably
Yeah, I think
requires
you're
an
right that we
ordinance.
have. And I was curious too as to whether there's anything within the way that commissions are formed in the city with regard to having an even number of commissioners versus an odd number. Because I think most all of them are odd numbers, and I assume that's to break it, prevent a tie vote.
Sure.
But
Just children, students.
She said ex officio.
On any
Yeah.
other.
but you can be voting or non-voting ex officio.
I
So,
see.
yeah. So, yeah.
It's a separate, it's another thing. But that first one go through. It's hard.
There's no rule on how commissions are formed or managed in the city that I know of. So probably most commissions have 7 seats, but there might be a couple of exceptions. Some of them have substantial ordinances like ours, some of them do not. Some of them have ex officio seats, some of them do not. So I think we could look at 2 other commissions for ideas, but there's no particular rule that we have to follow regarding how the commissions are formed.
So the commissioners need to be city residents.
If ordinance or bylaws require it.
Okay.
Our ordinance, I think, does stipulate residence.
Because I was curious if any other commissions have anyone under 18. So I don't know how it ties to voting at all. So it would be
Right.
public
Well, there
meeting.
was precedent, because Cope was on the human relations, and so she said that was her precedent, was that they had a high school student, so.
So I had, there was a group of students who are, I can't remember what it's called, iMoment or something like that. iMatter. Some high school students who formed this program called iMatter. I think it's nationally, and there's a group in town currently in one of the Champaign high schools that's working with some of the U of I students who came and met with the Institute for Sustainability, Energy, and Environment. I think they also met with Scott. Right? And the U of I students were wondering how could they facilitate. Well, they asked campus how could they facilitate having a student movement in support of sustainability, and we gave them some ideas. But they are continuing to have conversations with the high school students. So I think it's a great idea to include a high school student. But this point about how do you find one, maybe we could get the iMatter program to help identify, to do that outreach to somebody if we want to go that direction.
Comments, thoughts, for it, begin it?
I don't I don't know enough about iMatter to say one way or another. I think that's interesting. I think that maybe there's one thing that bugs me a little about Cope's email, which is that the person who applied, Sage had applied, did not hear anything back. I don't know if that is true or not, but I would like for Sage to get some sort of recognition for putting an application together at the very least, as kind of like a thank you. I think one of the best ways to discourage participation is to not respond to people when they put themselves out there. So I would like to see that happen as an absolute minimum.
Yeah, I agree with Stacy. That was kind of concerning.
And again, because it sort of gets a little bit more into the mayor's function and the staff function and all that, but
Right.
can we as a commission just sort of like send our own thanks to anybody who applies? Or I don't know. It gets a little complicated because of it being mediated through the mayor's office. But,
I guess I didn't realize that.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you very much
Complicated, but, like,
because,
right,
yeah. And because I guess I would want to extend the same courtesy to anybody who applies, but, yeah.
And then just piggybacking on Morgan, I was wondering if there is a way for even one meeting out of the year to sort of invite youth to a committee meeting where it's a little bit more dedicated to them, do a little bit of outreach. So then it's an
I
invitation.
kind of like that one better.
And so, at that meeting, an open invitation for them to always come back to our meetings, but this one will be a little bit more tailored towards, the audience, if that's a possibility.
Good idea.
Is there a motion of any sort that anybody wants to put forward regarding this? And we don't necessarily have to, take action tonight. We could think it over and revisit it next time. Is any possibility?
I think we should think about it. One of the things is not so much the process for how we would go about it. Like you were saying, we need to do the ordinance. We would have to adjust the ordinance and stuff like that, and the bylaws, whatever that is. But more what are we hoping to gain from it? What aspect of our role does this support? Or how might it end up changing what we're? I don't see it changing anything, but like what's the point? And I'm not saying there isn't one. Just actively think about what it is, because Stacy's comment about or suggestion about bringing a group maybe once periodically would. If our point is to get youth more engaged, having one student participate isn't going to have a high impact. And on campus we have a lot of students in committees to represent the students, and we actually struggle with them being able to attend. So we pick a student, we go through this whole process to get the one student to be there, and then they can't really make it a lot. And then, our student wasn't here, so we made decisions without him. And so there's the question of, does one voice, is it to help us remember to care about the youth perspective?
And also that there are many perspectives among various youths, so.
Right, one.
Related to Morgan's question, what's the big picture goal? If it's reasonable that one seat is reserved ex officio for a student or a youth, then we may consider, are there other categories that we should also have ex officio seats for? And then that brings up the question of, if
Inclusion.
5 out of 7 are ex officio of some sort, does that mean that we never have a full commission because we're always running around trying to recruit someone from that particular fits that description?
Right.
Maybe that's a problem worth having, because maybe the filling those types of roles is more important, maybe. But yeah, we should consider that. If we stepped back from one step down from ex officio, we could change bylaws that say we're going to work to recruit these, someone from these types of groups, organizations, demographics, and then it wouldn't be a requirement the way the next, an ordinance with an ex officio seat would be, but it would be a direction to staff to be serious about recruiting these folks, and a direction to the mayor's office that the commission who wrote these bylaws is interested in these things. That would be sort of a middle ground. It would give some direction, although lighten up the requirement and some of the unintended consequences.
All right, so food for thought for the next 2 weeks, and we take it up again.
Sure.
All right. Anything else before we move on to announcements?
I have just something that I think I don't want to put on the agenda for this meeting because I can't, open meetings rules and all that stuff. But I did read something about PACE that came out as a fact sheet today from the President's administration. Some kind of announcement on clean energy savings for all Americans initiative. It would be interesting to explore that further. It opened up PACE financing or created some guidance around PACE financing for residential
Not familiar with this.
property assessed
Yeah.
clean energy.
Mhm.
And it looks like it would relate to both solar, interesting that we just did this whole solar push here, but also some energy efficiency improvements to houses, which is a system by where you would get a loan and the loan would be paid back off of your property taxes based on the energy savings. And that when you sell the home in the future or sell the property in the future, that it has to get paid off with the property tax bill. So that was in there, and I thought that was interesting and worth exploring further.
I saw the headline. I haven't read the article yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps if we can just, have an update at the next meeting about
Mhm.
because I know that years back, and I think Steve, you'll probably remember this, that, we explored PACE, and then there was that change in the, was it?
It's the
Fannie Mae,
housing.
the housing authorities.
It's the housing authority.
They said they
whatever they're
wouldn't-
called.
Yeah, Fannie Mae, is that right?
Yeah, but they're actually regulated by the
okay.
housing authority, whatever it's called.
Yeah, so anyway, when that changed, that kind of put the kibosh on our plans.
On that
And so,
model.
yeah.
Well,
So it'd be interesting
in
to
fact, it only-
re-explore if we have,
it only quashed the residential
Yeah.
side of PACE.
okay. That's true.
Commercial has always been.
Right.
No one. So Illinois. So I'll give you a brief update.
Yeah. Okay.
Illinois had, since 2009, Illinois has had I think it's literally a 2-sentence commercial PACE authorization statute.
Ah,
And it basically says municipalities can do commercial PACE if they want to. No municipality in Illinois has done so, in part because there is no statewide guidance on how it should be done, and in part for all the other reasons that the city doesn't take action on something. So I haven't read this recent press release, but we'll see what it says. The only thing it would change, well, a big thing that would be changed, not the only thing, a big thing that it would change it could be the viability of residential PACE. Commercial PACE has been authorized in Illinois since 2009.
All right. Well, if we can just
Right, I
kind of
don't know
get-
how federal
yeah.
guidance ends up assisting states in making decisions, or whether or not states then take up that guidance and say, okay, we'll do this too.
For this issue, what happened was the Federal Housing Authority, is that what it is? FHA? I think that's what it's called. They issued some guidance that said that any loans that they and theirs, which is Fannie and Freddie, own the paper on, they did not want to be second in line to a PACE loan in case of a default. And what happened was all the folks who were considering our residential PACE program said, well, if we can't put the mortgage holder second in line of the PACE loan, it's not going to be viable. In fact, some cities, or at least one city in California, went ahead and did it, I guess as a dare to see what FHA would do, and FHA didn't do anything about it. So interpret that as you will.
Interesting.
Okay. Other announcements this time?
The Smithsonian Traveling Exhibit Waterways is at the Museum of Grand Prairie in Lake of the Woods. So people can learn about water conservation measures.
Great. Anything
Nothing.
else? All right. We have no other business before us. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there discussion? All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Those opposed? We'll see you later.
That was thorough.